Greetings and salutations. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Alright, so today's experience was shared to me via a subscriber, and I am going to use two different names for the two individuals who will be named, and the younger people that were also part of this experience will remain nameless because they were juveniles at the time. Now, it happened in the northern part of Montana, going into Idaho, all in very quick, violent succession. It was very terrifying, and what felt like an eternity for this gentleman, Brian, and his partner, who we will call Steve. It was only less than like 5 to 6 hours before, from beginning to end, but it felt like an eternity. Now, before we get into that though, when subscribers send me gifts, I like to thank them because it's the only kind of way I know how, is to say, hey, thank you, and I'd like to share with you. Now, Pups7, she is in the comment section and is a friend of mine, a friend of the channel's. She got me a great Moab shirt the other day that I shared with you guys, and she just sent this one, Moab, Utah Off-Road Adventures. I love it. I really do. And I thank you so much, Pups. Truly an amazing shirt. She also sent me, I don't know why, but I suffer from migraines. My eyes always hurt. And I always, as of late, for the last couple of months, have had a stiff neck. And she sent me these relaxation for your eyes with ultimate comfort soothing eye massager, 2 massage and heat levels with built-in Bluetooth speakers. How amazing is that? I haven't tried them yet. I'm going to try them when I go to bed here in a couple of hours. But I just wanted to share that with you guys and thank Pups personally, because it really does mean a lot to me that all of you guys think of me. It's still kind of overwhelming, but thank you very much. So today's experience it started in Montana, in Mineral County, Montana. and ended in Shushan, Idaho, back in 1989. Now, Brian, who is not his real name, and Steve both were correctional officers, but they weren't just correctional officers. They had degrees in child psychology, both of them. Also they were both kind of like athletic coordinators and involved in wilderness retreats. There was a program, at this time, it's no longer, the program that he worked in is no longer in existence because of this experience. There are other programs throughout the country, but it was a kind of a juvenile correctional outdoor explorer program. Just an outdoor program for youthful offenders to kind of give them or guide them in a better way. Now, the kids that qualified for these programs were they were not violent offenders. They were kind of upper tier in the facility that these kids were housed at. There's different levels. And the higher level kids were allowed to sign up for a program like this. And depending on how everything had gone, they were granted time off of their stay, and other kind of rewards to help them be successful in life. These were kids that never had a chance. Many of them had probably never seen a creek, stream, river, besides a river by a city. So they taught these kids just basic survival skills and skills on how to do things cooperation wise, to rely on each other, and so this program had been pretty successful in the past. And like I said, these were not, your violent offenders. These kids really had, for lack of a better term, a crappy upbringing, but were not, the facility still felt like they had an opportunity to succeed. Which, and even Brian said he feels like that was kind of a crappy outlook, because any kid guided properly and given the right amount of respect, love, and whatnot could succeed, So they had chose 3 of these juveniles to go and partake in this excursion. Now, it started out, like I said, they started out in Montana, and what the whole thing was is they would get dropped off at a certain location, and it's pretty strange because the location where they got dropped off starts on Route 250 and literally ends on Route 250 in a completely different state. So what happens is a van will come, and it is followed by another person. The Brian and Steve and the 3 kids are dropped off. They do their excursion. The van then goes to the end location, parks at a parking area, and the follow car brings the other staff member back to the facility. So where they parked the van is an area called Idaho Sentinel Trail, which is in Shushan, Idaho, by an area called Hoodoo Pass. And so they get dropped off, and they are in Montana, and they hike in. Now, it's a 4-day trip. So day 1 is hiking in, starts at around 1, 2 in the afternoon. Day 4 is the last part of the hike. They get out to the Sentinel Trail parking area and then drive back. It's technically, all in all, not 4 days. It's about 3. So they hike out, and the first day, the kids are amazed at how beautiful the area is. And it is deep wilderness. Brian and Steve have both done this trek multiple times. They've done it with other kids. They've soloed it. They've both gone together. And, because obviously the staff is going to have to know where they're going. You have 3 teenage youths. Their lives are depending on you. And their safety is depending on you. So, they have to map out, and it's all very detail oriented. Everything is done to spec in order for the state to even approve this trip or these trips. So they get out, and the kids are having the time of their life. He remembers that one of the kids had never been even close to the wilderness at all. And these kids were not from Montana or Idaho. They were from all around the country. And apparently the program that they were in is paid for by either the state that they come from or by the parents that is I guess responsible for paying for this their stay in the facility for their mistakes that they had made. Now, one of the kids was from New Jersey, and he was Brian's favorite on this trip. Really just a really decent kid. Never had a fair shake. Family was just there, but not. Dad incarcerated. Mom was a drug addict. And he was raised by his older sister, who was only like 3 or 4 years older than him. So a kid raising a kid. And, he ended up messing up and just committed, a theft to support his house, Not that it's right, but, you put people in a tough spot, and tough decisions have to be made, unfortunately. It's either we're not going to eat today, or I'm going to steal some food from a store, or how are we going to pay our rent or the heat? We're going to have to do something, And so These two other kids, really great kids as well, not from New Jersey. One of the other kids was from California, Los Angeles area. And the other kid, he believes, was from Las Vegas. He had actually done camping and such with his family. He had come from a really upper middle class family, and he was there because of drugs. The kid from LA, pretty much the same as the kid from New Jersey. So he liked all three of these kids, but the kid from New Jersey just was really special to him. And they're hiking. All the kids are having a blast, and they really are essentially free at this point. They could just take off and run, and they didn't carry. Brian and Steve didn't have firearms with them. Actually, there is a law that prohibited them from bringing a firearm with them, and otherwise things may have been a little different. So day one goes off without a hitch. They hike in and they set up camp in camp. They have MREs, marshmallows and such for s'mores at night, and some, just basic camping. Things that me living in the Adirondacks and growing up in the Adirondacks, I guess, would take for granted. I being in Boy Scouts, and who doesn't know what s'mores are, but so first night they eat, they have s'mores, and the kids settle into their tent, and Brian and Steve, even though they are on this excursion, they have to document everything. So they're sitting by the fire and they're talking about how the day had gone, documenting how each kid had done and such. And it was a requirement that they had to meet because of regulations, state regulations and such. Like I said, it's a very detailed, very right to the T. And as they are discussing the day and going over the notes and things, they hear this way off in the distance, this faint, what sounded like a whistle. And it was not a tune that they had heard. It did have I guess notes to it, but it was nothing, like Yankee Doodle Dandy or whatever someone would whistle. It was nothing like that. It was just a very strange kind of whistle off in the distance, way out, probably about as far as they hiked in to where they are, but away from them, off in the distance. So they both stop and look at each other, and Steve had made the comment, "Did you hear that?" And he said, what do you think that was? And bird? No, it wasn't a bird. And Steve goes, "I'm going to whistle back. Maybe it's someone that's lost." And Brian at that point said, "No, don't whistle back." And this is 1989. This is pre-internet. Brian had grown up with friends and family members that were familiar with native lore. And whistling in the woods is actually not a new thing. You don't whistle back if you hear whistling in the woods, nor do you whistle in the woods at night. And Native Americans had talked about that for a long time. It's not new. And unfortunately, creepypasta channels and horror stories, crappy movies have created kind of this fantasy world, So, but he's like, don't whistle back, whatever you do. It's could be something dangerous, something that we don't know about. Steve kind of looks at him like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, native lore states that there are spirits that lurk and roam the woods. Also, there are guardians of the woods. So let's just ignore it and see what goes on. They fill out their paperwork and they don't hear that whistle. It was just this one kind of, and it was a tune, but it was not a tune that they knew. And it was catchy. And so paperwork's done and they head into their tents to crash out for the night. Now, important to know, the kids were not, even though they are in a correctional facility, which is under lock and key, these 3 kids were in a tent, in a 4-man tent by themselves, with nothing stopping them from leaving at night when Brian and Steve got into their small 1-man tents and crashed out. And each 1-man tent was, the 4-man was in the middle, 1 man on one side, 1 man on the other. It was all based on trust. Day 2, everyone wakes up, they have breakfast, and they plan the itinerary of the day. This is what we're going to do. We're going to hike X amount of miles, and where we'll end up is a place called Lake Creek. And then from there, we'll camp. Day 3, we will hike some more to an area to the opposite side of an area called Hoodoo Lake. And at that point, what we will do is we will hike up, we'll hike north to Idaho, cross over into Idaho, and be at an area called Hoodoo Pass via the Idaho Sentinel Trail. And that was the itinerary of their hike and their camping excursion. As they are hiking on day 2, kids are unaware of the kind of weirdness of the night prior. And Brian and Steve wake up not even thinking about it. It was something so trivial that it wasn't anything to think about, They proceed to hike, and as they're walking, one of the kids starts to say, hey, I think I just saw someone over there in the distance, walking along in the woods, kind of mirroring how we are moving and where we are going to. And he kept saying it for a couple of hours. And the other 2 were kind of, being teenagers, being inquisitive and curious. Like, what do you mean? Who, where? What are you seeing? And Brian, Steve, one is in the front, one is in the back. Right around midday, they take a break, and they've got their probably halfway to where their camp trip or their camp for the second night is going to be. Steve says to Brian, hey, what's his name says he's seeing a person walking in the woods. He said, I didn't see anyone per se. He goes, I saw something. He goes, I saw movement. He's like, I'm not sure what I saw. Maybe it could have been a deer. Could have been, who knows? Maybe it was my eyes playing tricks on me, And Brian and him start to talk quickly about it. What do you mean? What'd you see? And he's like, something in the shadows along the trees, he said. But I'm pretty sure, or maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me and feeding into what he's seeing. But their trips prior to this, nothing has ever happened. This isn't their first excursion out. Like I said, Brian and Steve have both done this trip together. They've done it solo, and they've done it 3 or 4 times with other kids. So totally, they've been out in this area 7, 8 times. So it's not a new hike. It's mapped out for them. They know where to go. Actually, hiking through, they had tagged certain trees with orange reflective tape. And so Steve is adamant about, I swear I saw something. He's like, I'm not sure. Maybe it was a deer, or maybe just how the shadows are in the woods. He's like, and maybe because he's saying it, I'm thinking it. Brian says, all right, you lead, I'll take back, and we'll hike the rest of the way to Lake Creek campsite, and we'll figure out what's up from there. So they hike the rest of the way. They get to their camp. They set up camp, same setup as the night before. 4-man tent, 1-man tent on one side, 1-man tent on the other, fire pit in front. And these campsites have been the area where they're camping. There is a clearing for them that they created prior to. So it's not like they're got to clean out this area. It's already pretty much set. They've just got to set up the tents and, build the fire, put things back, to what it was. And they get to camp. They walk over to the creek a little bit. The kids are, amazed. Once again, they are in deep, deep woods. And this is truly like some deep forested area, preserved area. Kids are just shocked at what they're seeing. And they set up their camp. They get dinner set. They're doing their s'mores for the night, getting ready for bed. And as they're getting ready, the kids are cleaning up the mess, and because that's part of they contribute. Cleaning up their mess after having s'mores and getting ready for bed, brushing their teeth and whatnot. And as Brian and Steve are getting their paperwork out together, monitoring the kids, they hear one of the boys scream, like bloody murder scream. And they see him come running back to where the fire pit is. He wasn't even away from camp. He was on the back side of the tent, maybe 25, 30 feet, taking a whiz behind one of the trees. And he comes running back and he said, there's something in the woods. There's something in the woods. I just saw, there's huge eyes out in the woods watching me. He's like, I was taking a pee, he said, and I looked out in the woods. He goes, and I heard something. I heard some branches breaking or some sort of noise. And I looked up, and I saw these just huge yellow eyes staring at me. He said they were very tall. Whatever it is it's not a person. It's not a deer. They were very tall. And both Brian and Steve are like, well, hang on. Where? And what do you mean tall? So Brian says, show me where. Steve, stay with the other two. Let me see. And they proceed to walk out to where this kid had just been. And as they're walking, Brian thinks he can see something, but what he sees is a set of eyes, and almost like if I'm looking at you right now and I turn and walk away and my eyes are glowing, you know, it was, and he pushes the kid back, like behind him, and he says, stay right there. And he's trying to process what he had just seen, because even though it was split seconds, he could calculate that this thing was much taller than he is, much taller than any native animal in this area. His first guess at where these eyes would have been was somewhere around 12 feet in height, just going off of where the trees were into relation to his eyes, or this thing's eyes. He gets the kid back to the camp, and he says, you know, he looked at Steve and he gave Steve that, I'm not really sure. There's something definitely out here. Look, you know, like we're fucked kind of look, you know. But they can't let on for the kid's sake. And he says that to this day, he said, I wish I had known what I know now as an older person, more experienced person, and the more time I've had to learn in regards to trust and other kinds of working with kids, is you don't lie to them. You know, you don't lie to anyone. But at that point, feels like a lie is the best way to keep these kids calm and safe. So where they are in relation to the end of their trip, they are halfway. And they are responsible for these three kids' safety. They have to make split decisions. Also, because of some crappy law in correctional whatever, they could not carry a firearm. They did have flare guns, which is not, I mean, it's going to notify people, and it might really upset something if you shoot a flare at it, but it's not going to, you know what I mean? You might piss it off, but they quickly come to the decision of, we have to keep the kids calm, and we have to tell them, you know, that what you guys saw, what he saw, was probably a deer. It walked away. We're safe. We've seen this before. You know, just try and relax. You know, if there was any kind of danger, we would not even be here. You know, we wouldn't jeopardize your safety. So they get the kids in their tent, and they are, once again, sitting and talking by the fire, filling out paperwork on how the kids were. Each kid has their own sheets and such. And like I said, they are on their best behavior. They get a gift of being outside and technically being free. 2, they get a gift for being a good kid, or, having good behavior on this trip. They get a gift of either time off or whatnot. So these sheets are very important, even though they just had Brian just had a scare of his life, because he knew exactly how tall this thing was, and that is not a deer. They wait for about half hour, 45 minutes, till they can hear the kids, calm down and fall asleep. And Brian proceeds to tell Steve, hey, whatever he saw, I saw it for a split second. I saw a set of yellow eyes turn away from me, he said, and walk back into the woods. And Steve's like, all right, well, he said, no. It was at least double my height. It was 12 feet, maybe even taller. I don't know, what is beyond my field of sight. It could have been standing on an incline, a decline. Who knows? But this thing was huge. Why don't we do this? We'll take turns. I'll stay up. You sleep for a couple hours. You get me. We'll just alternate. That way we know that the kids are safe for the night. And if anything does happen, at least one of us is aware, and you can get me or I can get you, and we can figure out what we're going to do with the kids. If anything does happen, we don't know what this is. We'll figure out a way of getting them across Lake Creek and quite possibly being a little safer there. Steve signs up for the first watch, and Brian, of course, is a little hesitant, but does go in his tent and gets a couple hours of sleep. When he gets woken up by Steve, the immediate question, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's good. I haven't heard, a peep. Because I haven't heard a freaking peep. And Brian goes, all right, good. And he sits there for a second, and he kind of thought about the words that were just spoken to him. I haven't heard a peep. I heard nothing. And at that point, Brian goes, when you say you haven't heard a peep or you haven't heard any noise, are you saying from whatever that thing was? Or are you saying, all the wildlife in the area? Like complete silence. And at that point, Steve looks at him and says, it's dead silent. It's dead silent out there. And Brian goes, oh, man. He goes, do you know that if there is just any kind of animal movement or any kind of animal noise, though that one sign is pretty much stating that, hey, there is a predator in this area. Not all the time, but the majority of the time when the forest goes quiet, shit's going to hit the fan. He gets up, he sits down, brews himself some coffee. He says, all right, you go to bed. I got this next watch. When I wake you up, I'll go to bed for an hour. You wake me up in an hour. You go to bed for an hour, and then we'll get up and wake the kids up. All right, that works. Brian sits down for his couple of hour watch. And as he's sitting there, he's thinking about, wow, there really isn't any noise. You know, there's no crickets, there is no birds, there is nothing, just absolute silence. He can hear the pitter patter or whatnot of the creek, but other than that, it's just unnaturally silent. About 2 hours in, he's just sitting there. Once again, no noise. And he starts to hear movement just beyond the tent, where the tents are set up. And he's sitting there and he hears, it's, you know what movement sounds like in the woods when it's dead silent. And you know when a bipedal creature, a human creature, whatever, is moving through the woods. The movements are definitely different than a quadruped. Quadrupeds seem to be more stealthy. And he hears kind of just crunching of the forest litter and whatnot. He stands up because he can't see from where he was sitting. He stands up and he's looking over where his tents are, and he can't see beyond the kids' tent because it's a 4-man tent. It's a little taller than the 2 1-man tents. So he walks up by his tent and the kids' tent, and he's looking, and he sees that set of eyes staring at him off in the distance. He, judging on how far it was close enough to, if it wanted to run up at them and him at that time, it could have been there very quickly. But further enough out to where he couldn't make out detail of what it was. Only if the eyes were not that glowing kind of eerie yellow, he wouldn't have noticed anything there. So he proceeds to what am I going to do? You know, he goes into his tent really quick, opens his bag, gets the flare gun, loads the flare gun, and he's holding it. And he's like, all right, I don't know if I should wake everyone up, wake Steve up, but at least if whatever that is, I can at least shoot a flare at it once it gets close enough to me, in order to, make a direct hit. Because unlike a rifle or a pistol, a flare gun is very erratic when it comes out, and he's staring at this thing, and this thing's literally staring right at him. It knows where he is. It's pinpointed right on him. He can feel it. And and he makes the decision to wake up Steve. And he walks back up. He backs up from where he was standing. So he's standing in between the 2 tents. So he's got to back up and go around the kids' tent and get Steve up. As he's backing up and walking in front of the kids' tent, he hears this kind of weird whoosh noise. Just this weird, almost like the wind is getting cut. He just about gets to where Steve's tent is, and the tent is hit. Steve's tent is hit by something. And he hears Steve go, "What the?" Just screams out loud, "What the?" Because whatever had hit the tent had shook the tent. And he hears this kind of another whoosh. And he hears Steve scream out again. He hears a thud where right directly next to his tent, Steve goes, Brian, Steve, get out here. Get out here now. Authoritative. He's not even caring if the kids are up yet. He's like, get the fuck out of your tent. Something is getting thrown at your tent. He gets out, and they both kind of like, Steve's half asleep, freaked out because he just got woken up by something hitting his tent, and then another loud thud, and Brian yelling at him, get out of your tent. Come on. So Steve gets out and he's all disoriented, and Brian says, look. And they look, and they see that set of eyes just staring right at them. And the eyes kind of move for a split second. And it's a weird kind of movement. It's not an up or down movement. It was almost like this kind of like a vibration, if that makes any sense. Its eyes just seem to, and there's another wind getting cut sound, and right at that point, Steve's tent is just pretty much imploded on itself. Brian, not thinking, acting on pure instinct and fear, raises the flare gun and shoots. Not directly at it like he's aiming for it, but over it, in hopes that it'll scare whatever this thing is away. Because now you have a mangled up tent, and he shoots this flare, and it goes up into the air because he's got it at an angle, and it goes over. And everywhere this flare is traveling, you can see light. You can see what, for a split second, where everything is. You can see it's much brighter than the pitch dark. As it goes over where these eyes are, is when they see something that Brian and Steve will never forget. Brian he said, I still have nightmares about this trip. He said, but the first two things that I usually think about is if I hadn't gotten Steve out of his tent, he would have been killed. That third whoosh sound. Because that third whoosh, the second, first, whatever, all of them were large kind of boulders weighing somewhere about 60 to 70 pounds. This one boulder would have crushed, Steve. It would have pretty much, he would have been either dead or hurt so badly that he would not have been able to get out of the camp. It probably would have just crushed him. They see the tent, and what they see is, standing as that flare goes over, the eyes now, that yellow slowly disappears because now there's light above it. And they witness this just face that resembled what ancient cavemen, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon creatures would have looked like, except for two different things. One, it seemed to be wearing some sort of clothing, not jeans and a flannel, but some sort of clothing, not just a draped skin over it. It was what appeared to be Native American apparel, like ancient Native American clothing, like needlecraft. And at this one point, he believes that the hair on this creature's face and its hair on the top of its head was either a blonde or an orange color, but it's hard to pick out both because of the brightness of the flare going over it. During that time of the flare going over it, Brian has already put another flare into the gun, and he shoots another flare. The first flare, he can see it landed well beyond, and they can see smoke. They can see fire because it had hit the ground, and obviously there's, leaf litter and sticks and dry leaves and whatnot. Very ignitable. He's not thinking anything about that. He's thinking, what the did I just see? The kids are now moving around. And Steve says, guys, just stay in the tent until we tell you to come out. Get dressed, but stay in the tent. And they are now panicked. Something that they did not want to occur. Brian shoots the next flare, and he lowered the angle of it. He's watching it as it's, streaking through the sky there. Not the sky, but through the air. And it hits a tree just kind of like maybe 20, 30 feet in front of this thing. And it just drops and proceeds to ignite a little bit of forest litter right there. The kids are now screaming like, can we get out? What's going on? What's going on? Because they can hear, Steve kind of and Brian going back and forth in a banter, talking about what they had just seen. Steve's like, what the fuck was that? Like, oh my God, did you see it? Did you see it? It was huge. And yeah, it was. Its head was like 3 to 4 times the size of a human's head. But it looked so similar, but not really. Like it looked almost like, I'm trying to think of I know what he said, and I'm not going to use the term he said, but it looked almost like a throwback of a human. If that's, but very huge. It lets out this roar, this deep, kind of guttural, angry roar. Brian's putting another flare in, and he said, I don't think I can shoot, one more through this. Is yours? Where's yours? I'm probably going to melt this goddamn thing because of the quick succession of shooting through this flare gun. They're not as durable as what we have nowadays. This is 1989. Steve goes to get his, but realizes at that point that where he would have been crushed. And Brian, boom, another shot. as this thing's roaring. And it goes, this time he arced it again a little bit. Thank goodness the fire had died down, the one in the back. It wasn't as dry, as the ground was still damp underneath. So they watch this flare go over as it's still this just very guttural, emotional sound of anger, just fucking anger. The flare goes over it and it looks up at the flare and it raises its hand in the air to, I imagine, catch it. It obviously didn't, but it, trying to figure out what is it, let me try to catch this. And it's now at its full height. They can see everything for a split second, and it is every bit as tall as they thought, but much, much bigger. That's when they realized how big the head was. They could see, that its hair was this lighter kind of blondish red. It was not black haired. It was just an enormous, he had seen its hand when it reached up and he was like, that thing's hand is easily as big as that creature's face. It's a huge mitt. He yells, kids, come on, get out. Trying to be protective, but all bets are out the window right now. It's, if these kids get offended because they're getting yelled at, because we're trying to save your life, that's on them. Get the fuck out of the tent and listen to everything that we say. As they watch and it puts its hand up and that flare is going down, and it, right as it's about to hit the ground, it turns and it just starts to run back away from them. And they can hear this kind of god-awful noise that it's making. And it almost sounded like it was calling for something. And he said the best way of describing it would be how Chewbacca would kind of do that growl, kind of throaty growl. But this was just something much different. He can't explain exactly, what it sounded like. It was just this really just horrific sound. It proceeds to run back, but it's trying to call something. It sounded like, and they get the kids out of the tent. Steve gets his bag out of the tent. He moves the rock. The kids are looking around at the damage that is, what Steve's tent was. And he gets his pack out. He gets the flare gun. He puts his pack on his back. Brian goes, grabs his pack, puts his pack on. Kids, grab your packs, get a hoodie on. It's cold. It's going to be cold for the next couple of hours until daybreak. But right now, we've got to get somewhere away from here and somewhere safe. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and get across the creek. And we're going to start a fire, a big fire on that side of that creek. And we're all going to stick together no matter what. No matter what happens, we will do our best not to let anything happen to you. But we have to stick together. Just don't take off running. You are our responsibility. And, we don't want anything to happen to you, but we also don't want you guys to be accused of running away. They get on the other side, they start a fire, and all three kids are huddled, kind of, they're chilly, and standing looking, trying to figure out where that thing is as of right now. And they don't see anything. They don't hear anything. They don't see anything. Right about daybreak hits, and it's starting to get visibly lighter. One of the kids quickly just says, what is that? What the hell? What is that? Guys, what is that? And as what is that? There's this shrill kind of noise, this like loud kind of hissing shrill. And both Brian and Steve get over to where the kids are, and they're looking. And right on the side of the tree was what we know as crawlers. There was one of these creatures like propped up on the tree, maybe 9-10 feet off the ground, staring at them, hissing, like this very strange hissing sound, like a gurglish growl with a snake sound. Everyone's like, oh, where's the other thing though? Where's the other thing? What is that? What? Sun is up, not far, but it's up, and they watch this thing drop off the tree, off the side of the tree, and run quadruped like a dog does into the woods, and gone. They stay there. Sun is finally up. It's a couple of hours after this all occurs. They cross the creek and they walk back to their camp. And because everything that they had on them was not everything that they had with them. They have to obviously feed the kids. They're at the halfway point of the trip. They realize how bad Steve would have been. He would either been killed or gravely injured. And they quick make some food, coffee, and come up with a plan on the fly. And that plan is, we have technically, like I said, it was technically a 3-day, but it's a 4-day, excursion, because they were going to camp an extra day from where they were. And then earlier in the morning, late morning, early afternoon, get to where the Sentinel Trail is. They cross over into Idaho. They decide that what is going to happen is the 3 boys are going to stick with Brian. Steve is a couple years younger than Brian. Being younger, a little more athletic, but not by much. The plan is you're gonna go as fast as you can and get to where our end of our trip is going to be, because they pretty much just have to go past Hoodoo Lake and up their trail that they created, this trail path, and up into connect to the Centennial Trail. So that's the plan. And you're going to get help. If you have to flag someone down, if you have to, take the van and drive and get help, we need help. We aren't going to, survive another night if whatever that thing was, and then whatever the hell that other thing is, we have no idea. 1989, nobody's talking about crawlers. And whatever that thing is not a Bigfoot. It was clearly human-like, but not a human. It was 2.5 times the size of a human being, 15, 16 feet in height, man-like with clothing, Indian Native American clothing. They proceed to walk, and as they are walking out of this area after they ate something just to get some strength out, because right now Steve is going to run and he's going to get help, but Brian and the kids are going to hike as fast as they can to get the hell out of there as fast as they can. They're not camping another night. If they have to walk through darkness for an hour or two, they're getting back to that van. They're getting to the Centennial parking lot. So, plan is made, and the kids proceed to walk with Brian. Steve goes on up ahead. He's sprinting, running, and the kids and Brian are walking, speed walking, but they're not running. They still have to be safe with these kids. They have to worry about whatever the hell that was, but they can't, if one of these kids gets hurt, how are they going to get them out of here? They can't afford to stay in these woods another night, nor can they, if one gets hurt, possibly survive another night with whatever that thing and the other thing were. Obviously a crawler, but whatever that, the way he described it was a giant. I think there's two different versions of these giant-like creatures, Nephilim and giant, mountain giant. I believe that the Nephilim has supernatural ability to use supernatural powers. It's just my own opinion, my own theory. They couldn't tell, so as of, they do proceed to get out. Plan is Steve will get ahead. If they, the kids and Brian will proceed to keep walking, but Steve will get help to get them out of here immediately. That is the mission. Get the kids out of here. Let's do this as best and as quick as possible. As Steve reaches the Centennial Pass or trail where Hoodoo Pass is, the parking area, there, ironically enough, happens to be a Idaho State Police right there, looking, just doing his job. Steve comes running out of the woods, out of this trail, and there's the van. The police officer, he flags the police officer down and proceeds to say, hey, this is who I am. Here's my badge. I'm a correctional officer. We got a couple of kids with us. We are in the Juvenile Offender Explorer program, and some pretty strange stuff went down last night. My coworker is out there with the 3 kids. They are trying to get to where we are right now as quick as possible, but we need help. The police officer's like, what do you mean you need help if you're here? You know, and he's like, I don't know how to tell you this, he said, without feeling like, you know, I'm nuts or whatnot, but, you know, this is what just happened. And he proceeds to tell him what occurred. And the trooper kind of looks at him and says, you know, are you sure? Let me see your badge again. Are you sure that's your van? Are you on drugs? You know, it's just... And he radios in. And he says, you know, maybe you maybe it was misidentification. Maybe it was some fucking people messing with you. Who knows? You know, but... So that state police officer calls for a couple of other police officers to come out. And during all of this, park ranger, Idaho park rangers hear about this. They're notified. They come out. And one of the guys says to Steve, Brian doesn't know which one it was, but says to him, you probably had a run-in with Sasquatch. And Steve said, that thing out there was bigger than any Sasquatch I've ever heard of or have ever, you know, seen on, you know, those videos on the Patterson and Gimlin film. This thing was huge. This thing was easily 2.5 times my size. And it wasn't hairy in its face. It had a beard. It had hair, but it wore what appeared to be clothes. This thing was 16 feet in height. It had to have been, maybe even larger. It had pinpoint accuracy. It was truly messing with us, purposely. And it started the first night with the whistle. And he kind of cocked his head, whistle. And he said, huh. He goes, did any of you whistle back? Like, nope. And that was when Steve brought this up to Brian later on about the whistling thing. Park rangers end up getting some all-terrain vehicles, 4-wheelers, 3-wheelers and such, out there. And they get the kids, they get Brian. As they are now in the parking area, because you have 3 youthful offenders who are on an outing, the state police actually cuffed the kids, took it upon themselves to handcuff them, put them in the van, handcuffed until Brian and Steve's higher up personnel came. Everyone was questioned. They went back to their facility. From that point on, they were, state police are out of it now, but it really affected him watching those 3 kids get handcuffed, because they just ran for their lives. They just had a trip that was supposed to be one of the greatest memories of their lives, turning into one of the most horrific and terrifying memories of their lives. Even though only one of them saw the eyes, they didn't see how large the creature the mountain giant was, they did see the crawler creature in that tree. After that, there was no other experiences, but still. Protocol, whatever. It was shitty, and I really relate to how Brian felt, because he was like, these are our kids, and these state police officers took it upon themselves to cuff our kids. Not cool. They get back to the facility. The kids on the way there are uncuffed. They are on top tier of behavior, so they're great. They're uncuffed, and they get back to the facility where all 5 of the people were questioned. Brian, Steve, and the 3 kids. He was not part of their questioning, and apparently the 3 kids were questioned together and separately by the facility's warden or head honcho. Brian and Steve were both questioned, drug tested. The kids were drug tested because they're talking about seeing some sort of pale white creature in a tree, and that this thing dropped down and ran off like a dog. Rocks smashing tents, huge eyes 16 feet in the air. After the questioning is done, 2 or 3 days later, a black SUV pulls into Brian's home, into his driveway, and out comes 2 men in very basic black suits, almost like Lex Friedman suits. That's exactly what Brian said. He's like, they look like weird Lex Friedmans. They were in some basic black suits, nothing on the higher end. A white button up, black tie, black suits, black shoes. And they walked up to my door and rang the doorbell. He was questioned at his house for what seemed like forever. Threatened to forget about what he had seen that night. They were then, apparently during this period of time, Steve was also being visited by 2 other government officials in basic black suits. As they are, agreeing, they're pretty much being forced to sign paperwork, letting them, say, what you saw was something that cannot be explained away. What more than likely was human. Probably people messing with you, people that didn't want this program to exist, that they didn't want these kids in this part of Montana, Idaho. So that's probably why, which made no sense to Brian, because it was, 1, not public knowledge, and 2, what does it matter? These are kids. These are teenage kids. They're not fucking Jeffrey Dahmer, These are teenage kids. Good kids at that had just made mistakes. They get back to work a week later. all 3 kids that were in that facility are now in different facilities. Apparently, what Brian found out later through the grapevine was that none of the notes nor how the behavioral was, which was amazing, mattered. They were all shipped separately and spoken to, told to never speak of it for the rest of your life. And then they get into work. Like I said, they get into work, find out that the kids are gone. There's now, they get called into the warden's office. And in the office is a higher up government agent, definitely higher up, in a suit, but not a basic black business suit. Like this guy is wearing, he's somebody in the government. And as they are being told that the program is no longer available, and what the kids were transferred, and they will, regardless of anything, do the remainder of their time for their behavioral at different facilities away from each other, and nor will they ever speak about this. The warden is going on word for word, like exactly what this government guy is saying. It was almost like what Brian said was, it was almost like that government's guy's voice was in the warden's head, and everything that was being said was coming out of the warden's mouth as this guy's kind of nodding his head. They have to sign paperwork stating that the excursions are over. If anything, if the kids will, receive anything or any special privileges. But when they are being questioned, that government official who is, like I had just said, it almost reminded him that anything that was being said was coming, out of that government's agent's mind to him. He's standing behind him, behind the warden, and he's looking at both Steve and Brian, and he smiles, like almost because he could see the anguish in both of their faces. These are child psychiatrists. They, have worked very hard in their career to do what they do. Analyzing these kids for trying to figure out a better way for them to, live in the community. He is behind the warden off to the side, and he smiles. And both Brian and Steve looked at each other, looked back at the warden and the guy, and put their heads down because they witnessed the agent having reptilian-like eyes. And as he smiled, it was almost like a magnetic kind of, just its face kind of whoosh, swirled. Like it was getting pulled to one side and to the other. And during that movement, they could clearly see green skin. The devious smile. The lizard-like eyes and the green kind of facial structure underneath the human skin. They signed every and any paper that was put in front of them after that point. To this day, Brian wonders if that guy approached those 3 kids and did what he did to them, to what he had done to Steve and Brian, meaning that shapeshift shit. He's never been able to figure out where those kids were. Files redacted. And he still works in the field of child psychiatry, but no longer in a correctional facility. He's just... Tragically, he lost everything, but he gained a better job because he's more able to help kids more. He's able to help more kids this way, but he still to this day thinks about the kid from New Jersey, the kid from LA, and the kid from Las Vegas. He wonders if they're okay. He wonders if they were terrorized, just like he and Steve were. He now, like I said, helps kids, but he's not, this isn't the job that he blames himself for whatever, and he really does hope and pray that those 3 young men, regardless of the bullshit after their camping trip and hiking trip, what they went through on that trip and what they were put through after the trip, from right getting out of the woods, being handcuffed immediately and put in the back of your van, to being separated, to the warden not honoring any of the just, it's terrible, you know. So Brian, I feel bad for him. I feel bad for the kids. He still to this day talks to Steve. Steve actually still works in that correctional facility, still to this day. Fell into booze hard, you know. Brian said he became, you know, stereotypical correctional officer, alcoholic, hard worker, but an alcoholic, and just to forget the issues that he had gone through. And neither him nor Brian feel what like those kids went through. They blame themselves, because if they had not taken that trip, that, you know, those days, they might have successfully finished the program. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.